Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker is now just 35 days away from its official release by Disney, Lucasfilm, J.J. Abrams, and even Chris Terrio and creator George Lucas, that is all set and ready to end the Skywalker saga and the sequel trilogy itself. This is Mike Zero. Make sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel for future Star Wars content. Now, one thing about Episode 9 that a lot of fans are very concerned about is, of course, exactly how it's going to compare to the very ending of the original trilogy. A lot of fans are very much, interested in whether or not J.J. Abrams is going to be able to pull it off to really end the Skywalker saga properly, and I'm sure that you guys heard about the test screenings that took place for this film, as well as the dilemma involving the very ending of Episode 9. There's 3 different endings that Disney and Lucasfilm are trying to choose from, and that now George Lucas was called in to save Star Wars, to save certain elements of the movie. Now, on top of all of this, we do know that J.J. Abrams is very ambitious. He's trying to really deliver a very dark Star Wars film, a very emotional movie, if you will, one that would properly end the Skywalker saga in a sense that will satisfy a majority of the fans around the world. Now, on top of all of this, these past couple of weeks or so, we've been learning a whole lot more about this film, and what's very worrisome about the state of this movie has all to do with the fact that Disney and Lucasfilm are in a current state of desperation. Now, specifically, what's really intriguing about all of this involves George Lucas, where it's explained that during the reshoots of the film during the months of August, September, and October is when Disney and Lucasfilm came to the final decision to make crucial adjustments to the second and third acts of the movie. It's explained that during those months, many changes were made to the Rise of Skywalker's second and third acts that would drastically change how some of the characters were used, as well as how the film would also be cut into some main characters. It's explained that as of right now, with just 35 days to go until release for the film, George Lucas is currently resetting many of the scenes for the film's second and third acts and how they should have been edited together, and that Lucasfilm is actually working around the clock with George Lucas, J.J. Abrams, and Chris Terrio to put together the movie through George's vision, at least for the second and third acts. Now, it's also used as well as how some of John Williams' music was placed over certain shots of the movie, where additionally George Lucas is also described to be resetting the scenes that involve Palpatine and how they should have been edited together with Rey and Kylo Ren, and that many of the visual effects are quickly being changed by the visual effects team under George Lucas. Aside from this, this is the ending of the film that is actually currently the main focus, as well as since there are 3 different endings that Disney and Lucasfilm are choosing from, and that they are trying to now piece together into one big ending under George's supervision and how it should be done. Unfortunately, it's actually impossible to do this for reshoots since they are so close to release. However, the ending is going through a drastic change under George's supervision and how the Skywalker saga should properly end, with what he started back in 1977. Now, Disney and Lucasfilm are currently in a phase of desperation and are trying their absolute best to make the film work for fans around the world. Abrams and Chris Terrio are taking George's advice also on how some of the dialogue would be worked into the film and how it should overlay with certain shots of the movie, and that through George, the overall tone of the movie is being reset to make it as Lucasfilm brought in George as an emergency to bring in the film in the right direction, since they are now just a bit over 1 month away from its release. Now, one of the major changes to the scenes actually involves George Lucas. The fact that he will be resetting is what's said to be a Luke scene in the third act of the film that will use some of the deleted footage from the previous cut of the movie before the reshoots, and that those shots will be added in to provide a proper Luke scene at the end of the film that will satisfy nearly all fans around the world, that will leave them talking about the film for years on end. The movie is currently a big project for Disney that cannot fail at the box office, as it will determine the future of the franchise and where it will stand in the 2020s. So let's go over a couple of parts about this. Now, the thing about Episode 9 here is you can really see that this is quite a worrisome moment for not just us the fans, but also for Disney and Lucasfilm, of really trying to craft the final, Skywalker saga movie. I mean, this is a historical movie. This movie means everything. It is, pretty much going to really determine exactly where the franchise is going to go after this when it comes to live-action TV series or future Star Wars films, such as the new Star Wars trilogy, or standalone movies, such as theatrical releases or ones that are intended for Disney Plus, etc., etc. So this movie really does determine exactly what Disney and Lucasfilm are going to do with Star Wars overall in general. And that's exactly why they have George Lucas on board right now, resetting the film, essentially resetting of how the vital scenes in the movie would be edited, some of how, the visual effects will be applied to those specific moments in the movie, and that a lot of this has to do with the second and third acts of Episode 9. Now, the other piece that I do want to go over here that is also very worrisome, in my opinion, is the fact that Disney and Lucasfilm are in a phase of desperation. Now, this definitely comes off the fact that Disney and Lucasfilm, from what it seems, they're not really quite sure exactly what they are really doing to end the Skywalker saga for good. It seems like that they are really not confident in themselves to the point where they needed to call in George Lucas. And in my point of view, well, you know what, Disney? I mean, they should have had George on board from the very start with The Force Awakens. I'm sure that you guys heard about the story that Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, admitted that George Lucas felt betrayed by Disney of what they did with Lucasfilm and what they did with the Star Wars sequel trilogy, and how they used none of his ideas for The Force Awakens, and how that also applied to The Last Jedi. And you can really see that Disney and Lucasfilm, they didn't really promise George a whole lot. You guys may recall the famous interview where Kathleen Kennedy, promised that they would be taking special care about these characters that George created back in 1977. Now, clearly they did not respect that in The Last Jedi with the character of Luke, in my point of view at least. If you guys like The Last Jedi, that is fine, but in my point of view, that definitely was not my Luke Skywalker, right? It felt more like Mark Hamill being Mark Hamill in The Last Jedi as opposed to Mark Hamill being Luke. That's just how I felt. So with Episode 9, there's a lot on the table here. There is a big risk between Disney and Lucasfilm. The fact that they have George on board now in full, capacity here, I think is great. I think it's a sign that Disney and Lucasfilm are trying to make things right. The fact that George is resetting the movie, resetting many different scenes in the second and third acts that are vital to the overall plot of Episode 9, and how a lot of this has to do with the characters of Luke, Palpatine, you name it. Now, the other thing that I do want to go over that I think is also a vital piece of the fact that George Lucas is involved is how this also shows that Disney and Lucasfilm realize that they really needed George all along for The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. If you look at, The Mandalorian, the fact that George had somewhat of a role in that, I think that's the main reason as to why The Mandalorian is doing so well on Rotten Tomatoes. It's at like, what, 96% for the audience score? I mean, it's crazy. That just shows us how well a Star Wars project can be under Disney and Lucasfilm if they just get George involved in some way, shape, or form, or somebody who is very much in tune with the Star Wars franchise like Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau. And that's exactly what they need to do with the movies, in my opinion at least. So the last piece I just want to go over here is that this really is worrisome. I will admit, it's very worrisome about where the sequel trilogy is going to stand, how it's going to end, and exactly, whether or not this is a good or a bad move by Disney and Lucasfilm by resetting specific scenes for The Rise of Skywalker. I am confident that George knows what he's doing, but at the same exact time, I mean, look, we got 35 days to go. That's a little over 1 month away from release. They have to work with what they already shot. They can't reshoot anything. Reshoots are over. That's off the table. That is impossible to do as of right now. Right now, it's all about editing certain scenes, switching things around, doing over some of the special effects and stuff around those lines in order to really give the fans a specific new feel of the overall tone of Episode 9, and that's exactly why George is resetting the movie and essentially, ordering, re-edits of the film and special effects being redone. So that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to essentially give us a different tone of the film, and that's exactly what they aim to do with The Rise of Skywalker in order to give us an authentic Star Wars film that'll match itself with the previous, 6 Star Wars movies before 7 and 8. That'll actually be true to George's vision and what he actually wanted for The Force Awakens, that they really ignored George. And Bob Iger even admitted that George felt betrayed. That was a very big story, and I really felt bad for the man, for Lucas. I mean, this is his creation after all. So anyways, guys, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, do make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.
afternoon, we hear them once again.